We welcome you to another episode of Mill Valley's Curtain Theatre podcast, Behind the Curtain, an official Curtain Theatre production. More information can be found at curtaintheatre.org.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Curtain, the Curtain Theatre podcast. We are the Curtain Theatre in Mill Valley, California, doing free outdoor Shakespeare every year for how many years now?
This will be the 23rd production.
23 years of outdoor theater. That's amazing. So I'm sitting down right now with Michelle Delatra, Don Clark, and Stephen Beecroft. You guys are the board of the Curtain Theatre at the moment, right?
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing our stage manager. We also drag in, but
Sure thing. But you guys are three very essential members of the company who've been with it for a while now. Yeah. And so let's talk the Curtain Theatre. So I'd love to just get a sense from each of you, like what is the Curtain? How would you sell this company to an outsider? What would you tell them about it?
Well, I'd say it's Shakespeare's God intended. out in the outside world, it's free. There's original acoustic music. There's no microphones, no electricity in the productions. It's just the sound of the human voice. Some wonderful sets that are one of our founders, Steve Coleman, designed. And we exist really because of a wonderful natural space where it's outdoors and intimate at the same time, which is a very rare combination. The redwoods are part of the stage. There's a beautiful old Mill Creek winding behind the stage. And people come to see the show, but a lot of people are just wandering through the park and they say, what the heck? And then they get sucked into the production. Yeah. So it's a very organic, very low budget. We are the antithesis of, say, Ashland or Stratford in the sense of, for probably the lowest budget continuing running show in the country, you get a pretty good deal.
Pretty good shows, yeah.
We are high bar, low budget. Well, it was originally put together for the Mill Valley Centennial as a community celebration. So it kind of has its roots in always being aware that we're part of a community. And the natural amphitheater that we're working in just forces you into that. Everybody's right in your lap. It's small, but it's you're in an open park, and somehow it still encloses you in its little world, and you can really share with an audience. Live theater, which nothing is like that. I mean, that's a very unique experience. You can't get that in film art. And anything else I can think of is this coming together of an audience and a crazy bunch of mad actors and production people to share a story that's different every single time you see it and you participate in it. And sometimes you have the random dog coming through or a child trying to climb up the side of the stage.
A leaf blower.
A leaf blower, yes, we have a battle with a leaf blower behind us. So there's an element of what's kind of called scrappiness to being outside. You don't have the slick buildings and storage, which we wish we had, but you have this kind of magic of being in a uniquely gorgeous spot with people who really appreciate both the space and the story being told. We choose stories that are the pieces of Shakespeare that we do, we recognize are things which are about community coming together, suffering and winning and losing, and they are ones that can be done in the park, the forest comedies or the romances. And we're doing a tragedy this year. We don't very often do that because it's a little hard to have the occasional dog run across King Lear, but it is it's very true to the play, true to the stories. I think we try and stick to really being able to tell the story for someone who might not have ever seen Shakespeare.
People ask us sometimes, is it a kids show? And we say, no, a lot of kids won't get it, but for the kids who do get it, it's a life-changing experience for some kids. And so we don't dumb it down for anyone, but we try to make them pretty engaging, accessible selections as far as the shows we decide to do.
And we also put in a lot of choreography, a lot of fight choreography, so quite often, as you know, we'll be rehearsing, and kids and families will come and they'll sit and they'll watch all the rehearsals because it's entertaining, just that. And that brings them in and it makes it more interesting for everybody. I would just add a couple things on the community side. It really is, in the best sense of the word, of community theater, because I think we do extraordinarily good productions, but this is entirely inclusive. This is free. So Mill Valley has a Mill Valley Arts Festival. It has a Mill Valley Film Festival. All those cost quite a lot of money to do. You can come to this Shakespeare production, bring your picnic, bring your kids, and it's all entirely free. And I'm personally, I think we all are very proud of that. And the other thing you find is that, you know, the community has really gotten used to this. And so I live in Mill Valley. I get people in the winter coming up to me in the square, Mill Valley, saying, "What's the production?" You know, and kids come running up and say, "That was a great show last year." So it's really quite rewarding.
Yeah, I was noticing the other day, I got recognized at the Pete's Coffee down the street by all the baristas. Were like, "Oh, you're Valentine." My mom calls it being Marinfamous. Marinfamous.
My great one is I've had several times where kids have come up, you know, teens or whatever, and said, "You're the Shakespeare man." I've been called a lot worse.
Yeah. No, it's a really sweet thing, because like you said, this is this totally inclusive event, being free and being in the park. It's not like a mountain play where you got to take a huge hike up to it. I mean, and also pay, but also it's not like all these other, and not like those aren't wonderful, but I mean, there's a barrier to entry. If you don't want to put out the money for it, you can't go. But with here, you know, probably a lot of people come here who don't normally go to the theater, right?
I think so.
How's the response been? Like, from, you mentioned the people in the community noticing stuff, but like after shows, you talk about people coming to rehearsals. Like, how do you feel the community has started to feel about the curtain?
I think they feel part of it. I mean, I think that I really appreciate it, and especially people who've had kids that came and got hooked, because you do at some point, if you're a Shakespeare maniac, like, you have to be, in order to produce this particular kind of theater, you have to be special kind of madness where you're in your happiest zone doing Shakespeare. You get a bug at some point. It's usually when you're pretty young that you see it, and this is one of the opportunities for that to happen, especially if you aren't able to take a kid to Ashland or someplace where they get a live outdoor that's not that hasn't been interpreted overly much. One of the things I think about the plays that we do is that we try and stick to an aesthetic in the park which, you know, doesn't ignore the park that's there. So and also that is not really, it isn't that our directors don't work their tails off putting these plays up, but that it's not visibly, this is the director's interpretation of this play. Instead, they come away really feeling like they know the play, and that it's that they really have participated in the story. Now you can go and see Two Gentlemen of Verona as a musical on Mars, and you will really enjoy it because you already have the necessary background of the guts of this story to be able to play with it, because they're very flexible plays.
It's a great place to see a play for the first time.
Yeah, it is.
And we have kids that, I remember the one year, Henry IV, that you play Prince Hal, where these two sisters and their family came, so many rehearsals, and they went to, the girls went to at least 5 shows, and the one had her birthday party at our show.
Right, with the birthday party.
That was kind of wild.
Well, I've had a couple friends have their weddings after seeing our shows on that stage.
Oh, wow.
But I'm going to tell the story that the Mill Valley Historical Society just did a wonderful write-up of the history of the curtain, which just came out. And I gave them the anecdote that I always love, the very first show, which it was only envisioned, believed it was going to be a one-shot thing, 3 days. We did Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the year 2000. And
As You Like
and
It.
this girl who was 3 years old came and sat in the front row and watched the entire production of As You Like It, did not budge. She came the next day in costume. She came the third day in costume. Her name's Julia Todhunter, and the next year she was in the show. She was the changeling child in Midsummer, and then she was also in The Tempest.
That's right, she was a spirit in The Tempest, yeah.
So, I mean, it was kind of like a life-changing experience.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I get misty when I think of it, actually. It's silly.
No, it's really.
And it's
I mean, it's beautiful what you guys have done for this community, and then especially the young people in this community who, like you said, a lot of theater is really inaccessible to young people because of how highbrow a lot of it is in terms of interpretation and all that stuff, and also because what parent wants to spend $30 to bring their kid to a show they might not understand,
or
Right.
come inside and sit down and be quiet.
Yeah.
That's the huge advantage of being
And
where
we're-
we are. You can bring a kid. If they're not ready for this, they watch it for 20 minutes, they go over to the playground. It's fine. You can come back and see the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
It's they're
Yeah.
you can safely come, but it's not a kid's show. So we don't, as I say, dumb it down. So some kids will, especially very young kids, get it, and I think it's because they're used to not understanding all the language.
Yeah, totally.
They spend their lives working things in context, so they're not worried about the words. People will want to understand every word, and you gotta let that go.
I think that's an underrated element of Shakespeare, is that you can still enjoy it with only, say, getting 40, 50, 60% of the language, what they're really saying, because it just sounds good.
Yeah.
And the people are acting and they're emoting, and so you're getting their character,
They know what
and
they're saying.
and you're getting the story, even if you don't get all the language.
And that latter part is key. Is we've worked very, very hard with our actors, with the music in it, the dance, the fight choreography, etc. We work a ton on building characterizations. And what we found last year, and we did Two Gentlemen of Verona, which is very rarely done. And there's reasons for that, right? It took a lot of work to get that play up in a form, but it was also all the work that the characters, that we had the actors do on character, that everybody seemed to understand it very well.
Yeah.
But you had to have that. If you just came on and read the play like most people did, it's just, I don't want to go to this.
Really weird.
But people loved it because of the way we do it. So far from dumbing it down, I think we actually do a really pretty good job of trying to get to the bottom plays and make them very interesting.
Yeah, I noticed that with Two Gents. We had people, it was a pretty common occurrence for people to be booing Nilsson when he walked off stage in those first few scenes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, when I was reading the play for the first time, I didn't really get what Proteus was doing until near the end of the show. But people picked it up quickly because of what you said, the characterization, because, me and Jillian were as Valentine and Sylvia, were building that relationship, and then Nilsson as Proteus was building his whole characterization, that even if you don't get the language, because that's some pretty complex language, you still understand the meaning behind it.
Yeah. Well, his betrayals are so manifest, and people are hissing him. And I thought that's what was and Nelson was going, yes. They hate me. That's good.
So there is an element of Korean melodrama to that play, and you just leaned into it. It was great. Let's do that.
Yeah, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but that's probably one of the reasons why you continue to do Shakespeare, because it's these very universal stories that anyone can understand.
And not only are they universal in the sense that they really are dealing with basic human experience and an amazing understanding of it, but if you do it all your life, boy, these plays, they just change. Every time you see them, you identify with different people in it, and different, and as we're talking about Romeo and Juliet, and now I'm a grandmother. When I first started this, I identified with Juliet, and now I identify with the parents.
Right.
It's like the downfall of these families. That's where it's like, the kids in trouble again. But it is. But it feeds you stuff all of your life that you get.
There's
wonderful.
there's this upstairs downstairs thing of it. It's the low class people and the high class people, and he zooms in on both of them, and he's definitely he was writing for a crowd, which was a mixed crowd. And the Shakespeare plays were put on at court, but they were also put on in the rabble of London. So he had to do things that appealed to a certain clientele.
A lot of butts in the
Basically, it
seats.
had to appeal to totally different clientele.
Yeah.
And so he had a great. The other thing I think about my theory about him is also, one of the things that's so different about him is all the characters are three-dimensional. Even these people that have like one line and just move across the stage. And the reason that is because Shakespeare worked with that guy for 20 years, and he can't act his way out of a paper bag. I'm not going to give him a bad part. I'm going to give him a good part because he's fucking lifted my things for 20 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's really important. One of the things that I think we try to do at the Curtain as well is we've got a stable of people who've been with us for a long time, acting and involved, and then we always have new people, and it's wonderful. But you'll often see experienced actors who've been with us for ages play small parts, right? I've done it, Michelle's done it, we've all done it, and that's really important because where productions often fall down is when the lesser parts are not
too
good,
uneven,
right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you get really good actors, even doing the smaller parts, as Don said, Shakespeare wrote these things in 3 dimensions, so you can make a meal out of them, and we try to do that a lot. So
Totally.
I think it might be a good moment to talk about how it's changed from its early years to now, because it has gone through a large arc. And in its first, as they say, scrappy years, we couldn't have, we were practically pulling people off the street to play parts. You were laughing the other day about how in our first Midsummer Night's Dream, I don't think we had any fairies who were under the age of 60.
which is a take. Which is a take.
It was a take. It was a take, but it was a necessity. And it was so, and it always worked because there was an element of kind of just madness that we got it all put together, and there were so few of us running. I mean, there were years when I kind of was basically doing everything that was working up, and we're just kind of reaching the end of our ability to stretch any further with what we had, with like 3 volunteers that didn't live in Marin, and it's kind of like, what are we doing? And one day we were getting Merry Wives up, and our director's mother got sick up north, and she had to leave right before we started rehearsals and things, and so we had to drop the play right away, and we stuck
This
in.
is Much Ado, right?
No, this I think was when Susanna left with and Mary Wives was going to go up. That's why I put Mary Wives up later, the next year.
All right.
But we had to make a sudden substitution, and one of our board members writes musicals. And she wrote a music. She had written a musical she wanted to put up on that was built on Comedy of Errors. So we put that up. We are not a musical company. We're a lot more now, especially back then. So we had no singers, no dancers, and and no keyboard. It's kind of like, and we had to suddenly reboot for that, and we did it. It was,
Well, it's
some
funny
people
because
love that play.
people actually.
Sure.
that's
really
when I
liked it.
joined.
And so one day
and-
we're in the park going, what are we going to do? And Steve walked through the park. And so I think somebody just said, you, here, read this. And Steve, as he left, we thought, oh my God, he dances, he sings, he walks, he talks, he crawls on his belly like a reptile. And he just arrived at the perfect time where we just needed. That's the piece we needed right then. And then he was also wonderful and lived next to the park and could handle the politicians that we were having a hard time handling. So that really was a turning point for us.
As we're here in the church, it's the Church of Our Savior, it's called. So I was thinking about the other thing was hand to mouth in the early years is where to rehearse.
Oh, right,
And we rehearsed sometimes in Michael Clifford's house in Berkeley. We rehearsed at various random places, including the Mill Valley Golf Club house at times.
Right.
I'm trying to remember where else we
When
rehearsed.
in Throckmorton before they had, when she had just bought it, but she hadn't fixed it up yet.
Yeah,
so
sure.
it was sort of like no lights kind of.
Right.
We actually did a production there. But
But it is besides we'll get into Steve's contributions in more depth, but the just this church is just such a godsend.
Oh my!
I mean, its location
Perfectly.
plus all its attributes and facilities are so.
It's been such
helpful.
a supportive. I mean, that really made us suddenly feel like, oh, I guess the community will support us doing this.
They're really good to us.
Yeah.
So I'd love to rewind in the history. You mentioned when Steve coming through the park and you guys seeing Steve, and that was a turning point in the curtain. before that, like what was the founding of the Curtain Theater like?
So there were 4 people in Mill Valley who got together and thought they wanted to do a centennial show, and they were John Leonard, who had a lot of political jobs in various committee things, and I think was mayor for a while.
He was mayor, yeah.
Right. It was his idea initially. He's not a theater person, but he had hung around with a lot of the theater people in the East Bay, and Abby Wasserman, who had theater background. He asked her to come in, and they said, well, let's talk to Michael Clifford, who was also a Mill Valley person, but living in Berkeley then, who had was one of the people who started Berkeley Rep and then started the California Shakespeare. It wasn't called Berkeley Shakespeare Festival then, and so she was insane for Shakespeare and believed that anything could be done, despite the fact that we didn't have the people or the money or the, it was like, she just never let anything get in the way.
Totally.
And we had 4 weeks, theoretically, to put up As You Like It for this.
But we should mention
weekend.
the 4th person is Steve Coleman.
Oh, and Steve Coleman, of course, who was a
and
friend of all. They all grew up together.
They all knew each other,
together,
and Steve's sort of, it was his vision in the sense of what could be how we could make this space a
right, because
show.
he's always been somebody who deeply understands the park. And so then Michael I had worked with we did, my dad knew her dad. We'd known each other all of our lives really at various times, but I had been in a Moliere in the Parks company in the Midwest that she ran. And
we knew her in the Twin Cities as well as San Francisco, the Twin Cities, back to California. It's funny to know her.
So we both kind of moved back to California at the same time. So she called me up to come in and work on this project, and Don, she knew Don as well, who got dragged in with probably no idea what was happening to him.
Yeah, Michelle was a Shakespeare person, a theater person, and I was totally not, just a music person. But we did As You Like It, and that has the part Amiens, the wandering minstrel.
Yeah.
So I played that role, and it's one of the few and hopefully only times I have had some speaking lines in a play. I'm not an actor.
It's pretty hilarious, that's true. But so we just thought we'd do that one show, and we had just a few weeks to put the whole thing together. So it was grabbing a lot of actors, mostly who are friends of Michael's, and just kind of throwing it together down there. And it was so great. It was so exciting and so fun. It was so beautiful because we had Steve Coleman behind us, who is a genius with, just beautiful things appearing out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so we decided after we finished that long weekend that we would try and do it again next year. And it just got a little longer, and we met resistance with the park because they were telling them to give up their stage during very profitable times for booking weddings. And to play fair with them, the city had basically told Parks and Recs that they needed to support themselves. And so that they needed an income, and that was a major source of income. So we had a very hard time communicating.
It was very important initially that we had John Leonard, who with his connections in the community initially, because a lot of us were coming from Berkeley and Oakland.
Yeah.
Right, and they kind of wore John out.
After a while,
anyone who worked. It's totally changed now. I mean, we're in much better shape, but it was really pretty difficult. And I didn't want to be a carpetbagger coming in and saying, I'm going to do this stuff for Mill Valley. I lived here in high school, but, I was a long time that I had not been in Mill Valley. And so I was only willing to do this if the Mill Valley people were involved in it. And we were kind of at the edge of that, where everybody who's actually doing the work were all in the East Bay. We could not get a Marin person who would come through in the long run until Steve showed up. And then Steve showed up, and he just put that Steve energy right when we needed it, and brought the whole choreography and, God help us, fighting and stuff into play. So then it started to kind of get back on being more like approaching it more professionally. And it was it went through a couple of different artistic directors. We had one who had to move away because up north, she was wonderful, Susanna Woods, and she brought things like, she said, we need chairs for the audience. Things like just, basic stuff. We just, we never thought of that.
Yeah,
you know?
one of the changes was we used to play and act out in the dirt in front of the stage. We didn't. So she said, no, we need audience there, put all the action on the stage. That was one of her contributions.
Right.
Sure.
And the idea of chairs,
Right.
which...
I was working at Stinson Shakes for a long time, and it happened to hit right when they closed, and so they had a lot of chairs that put on the side of the road. So I took my vans down and we picked up chairs. We still are using, they're probably not that safe, using old Stinson, bless their hearts, chairs. But she was more interested in creating a professional theater, and so she was. She kind of pushed us towards working more professionally, and that's just kind of basically not going to happen here. I mean, it's really important to us that we don't become a professional theater. We have Marin Shakes. We have professional theater in Marin, and I used to work in professional theater. I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to deal with unions anymore. It was like, that's not why I want to do the Shakespeare. The Shakespeare is kind of too close to me to make it into the job.
Yeah.
And and you could never quite pull it that way. But she did she pushed us as far as it's possible to go without doing that. So she really cleaned us up.
And she did, well, the first show did Love's Labor's Lost, which was a bizarre experience because it got pushed into October. So the shows were like in this kind of fog, and it was very strange. But she had a nice concept. It was in the Middle East, so there was sort of like belly dance, and the kind of music was kind of cool to do that. And, but her Midsummer was really, really good, and she attracted this cadre of people who were like these young people actors wanted to like move in together and live together for the rest of their lives. It was like
I think I was
really a kind of a cult of personality. But I think the Midsummer was just exceptionally good. And then the 12th night she said in the Old South, which was kind of interesting. But then she moved on, and then
she had to move up north. But she started a really good professional Shakespeare festival up on it's on Cambridge Island.
Whidbey Island.
Whidbey Island.
Whidbey Island.
So that's been going on for a long time.
I've heard of that company.
Yeah, it's a good company.
It's very similar beautiful outdoor space.
And she had a lot of imagination at figuring out how to deal with the space. I mean, it would be they bought a big old circus tent to put up, mainly because it rains up there all the time. But she was always able to kind of think out of the box and get us to do some things we hadn't thought we could do. That we could.
She had worked at Dominican, right?
Yeah, she was teaching at Dominican when
she had contacts with a lot of young people there.
Yeah, there. So that was great. And she did several years, and then we had one kind of we had a couple. We had Tam High came in and they did Romeo and Juliet for a year. And we were just kind of like a little unsettled in there. And so finally I just said, okay, I'm taking over. And this is because I think that I understand how we work, which we work a little bit more as a cooperative than we do as what would be normally a top-down theater.
Totally.
So you've really got to be able to work with the skills around you. You can't really control that as much as you might if you were working in a season, a theater that has a season and a staff that's just in there to produce a season. We have to really be, how would you say, engaged and also sort of
flexible.
Flexible, but own the play. You have to ask a lot of different people. Though you know what Steve Coleman can do. Don't ask him to do a gray rock background for Romeo and Juliet. It's sort of that you. Using the strengths of the company makes it really feel like a company.
Yeah.
And I think it's benefited a lot from it because we get new talent that comes in and
I think people really feel that, actually.
It feels like a family.
It does, because the board members, all of us are really, really passionate about the shows, about the music, about everything in the shows. But there's also no overweening egos here. Like, everybody's got an ego, but like we work together really, really well. And the whole thing, there's like a camaraderie movement forward to get the best out of everybody in this
Yeah.
thing. And I think that really shows to actors. I think it does.
I hope so.
And
yeah.
because there is a lot of labor that required of our actors that a lot of people don't have to put up with. Starting with the costume, there's no place to store anything
Yep.
there. So everybody has to take how many costumes they have. They've got to take them home, take care of them, make sure they don't get filthy in the park, and there's things like that. It's basically like camping in the woods. So we have to bring everything down, set up the backstage, set up tarps so we're not just totally immersed in dust, and so it requires people to have, can I help you lift that? Can lug these things down? Can we need some help doing this? And people, it's nobody's job description. You can't. There can't be sort of like union. Oh, I don't do that. I need a break
Everybody's got to muck
2
in.
minutes. It's like everybody's got to muck in. Exactly.
It's a little bit more like a traveling theater that way.
Yeah.
You feel like you got to get it off the wagon. You got to get back
But
on the wagon.
there's also a passion to make really good theater.
Yes, I think that's really true.
And I think that's getting more and more and more as we go along. And I think actors feel that, everybody involved feels it, and I think it brings more people to us,
Yeah.
which is really great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that back to the historical flow just a little bit. So Michelle hadn't really directed, in this company, and then you came back, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it was As You Like It Again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was very successful. And then was it Merry Wives? No.
Much Ado.
Much Ado.
Much Ado. We did Merry Wives early on because we had already kind
Or
of
was
set
it Merry
up.
Wives first?
Mary Wives came out. No, it was because I started
You
with.
started with.
I started with Hot Day in Ephesus, and then it was As You Like It, Much Ado, and then I think Mary Wives after
Okay.
that.
Anyway, roughly those shows, and they were really good.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
There was a lot of just a lot of great stuff.
We just had. I felt like we kind of got we got the right new talent in the pieces, so we didn't have to compromise anywhere. Like we
Right.
could really do what we wanted to visualize, and didn't have to worry so much.
Right.
Yeah, I mean we've mostly done comedies, and it really helps in the park. You get people laughing.
Yeah.
You really, you've given them something.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a matinee.
It's a matinee, but it definitely it makes it a lot easier to go for laughs, and it's which is easier to do when you've got dogs running around and bikes and
Some leaf blowers, but because I think, as Steve has pointed out, that we're getting more and more casts now who we can actually really challenge. We don't have to spend really too much time on language. It's like how to speak this, how to do this. Coming in with a lot of skills already means that we can really go for the emotional heart, especially when you start preparing them like Steve does, like 3 months in advance. That's pretty willing actors. It means that we can take more challenging plays on, and it's it's the reason we can come back to R&J. And that I think we're still a little ways from doing Lear, but we can certainly do the romances. We might do something as crazy as Cymbeline and get away with it now.
I think so. Yeah.
So I wanted to say, because we were talking about getting into today where the curtain is, in 2020 we had the pandemic, the shelter in place, theaters closed. I know 12th Night was postponed a year for you guys. And then a lot when restrictions started lifting, a lot of theaters didn't reopen, and a lot of theaters are still suffering today.
Everybody.
Main Stage West recently closed. Central Works just posted something about what their next season might look like. Cal Shakes isn't doing a season this summer, which could have a lot of reasons behind it, but a lot of theaters are going through this turmoil and this change. What has Curtain looked like in the last few years, and like how have you guys reacted to all of that?
Well, actually, I think being small and scrappy
And low
paid
budget.
off for us in this situation.
Low budget.
Yeah.
We didn't have to support a building that was empty. We didn't have to return tickets to people who were coming. It's like, it was hard, and it's heartbreaking to have to cancel a show. It's like we finally did, but it was nothing as difficult as if we were running
we have no full-time staff.
no staff that we had to lay off. No, it's like we could pull in our horns and say, let's see what happens. And then amazingly, I loved the 12th night cast, and I was really distressed that we had to cancel it. And we got almost everyone back. That never happens. When you have to restage something that you actually get the cast that you had originally cast. That's just unheard of.
And
because
we
the
pulled the
pandemic
plug.
meant nobody had anywhere else to go.
If you go back, we pulled the plug quite late, and it was like March of 2020 was when everything shut down, and we didn't cancel. I don't think till like late June.
Yeah,
So we
just
were
before
we were
rehearsals.
just right up to the time when we had to decide to go, and it just became clear there was no possible way to do it. But then the other thing about us is we were so lucky is when we did reconvene, as Michelle said, we got the actors back, but also we're outside.
Yeah.
So we could. I mean, the audience. It's really if the audience is not going to come, there's no point in us being there.
Yeah.
So we basically, we did a lot of things to try to reduce our risks. We rehearse out here in the courtyard. We set the audience back. We sort of divorced the band. We had like the band. The whole audience was masked. We sort of. I'm sure we insisted, but we.
The park thankfully legislated it, so we didn't have to insist.
We asked the audience. This is 2021 now, right?
Yeah, it was 2021.
Yeah, 2021. We came back and the audience was masked, and it all worked well.
Yeah.
But what was sort of interesting is then here in 2022. That's the year we had the trouble with all the people getting COVID.
Yeah.
Was last year, and
because the masks are off.
like right after. I mean, we had a couple people drop out and had to be subbed in by understudies, and then like right after the show. I mean, like you and
everybody got it.
3 or 4 people went down right.
I went down right after the show.
Right when the show ended. And it's funny
Thank
because
God it was after.
We just made it.
exactly.
The
The timing was just so blessed.
And it wasn't just us. It was happening everywhere. All the community theaters had just started opening again and stuff. Everybody was canceling shows. COVID really hit again, without, people thought, well, it's done, but it wasn't done. I mean, it's not done now. It's just, so it's become the new reality. We now, as Steve has bitterly learned, have to put understudies in place right away.
Yeah.
Because it's you just have to expect the stuff to happen.
Right.
And it's the best you can do with backup, but it is a new reality, and the indoor theaters it's hit harder.
Yeah, I also think the fact that you guys mentioned that Curtain is really this collective. That helps in a time like this, because I remember throughout the entire rehearsal process of Two Gents, whenever someone was down with COVID, somebody stepped in, and we were constantly having to move. And you changed the rehearsal schedule like 4 or 5 times because I got sick the first week, and I'm in like every other scene, so you can't you can't rehearse for a while with me.
Flexibility.
So you kept changing things around, and we didn't have to cancel a single show.
No.
We didn't have to, even when like the last weekend came and we lost an actor due to COVID, it was like no sweat. Like we can do this. There's no problem. The show's gonna happen just fine.
And that's that's a credit to Steve's planning, but some people really stepped up and learned their lines.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
And again, that's a company feel.
That's a company
right?
feel.
Yeah.
It is very much a company feel, and I love being part of it. I've always loved being part of this company, and it's partly the setting, it's partly the community, it's partly the quality of what we do, but there also is this sense of it's a really great company of actors and artists. And I always say, in my things that I write in for the program, thank God for the ever creative board of the Curtain Theatre, and it's absolutely true, and that's led by Michelle as the artistic director at the top, and that kind of sets the tone.
Yeah.
And I've been in theatre companies before where it's not like that.
It's not an easy thing to run generally.
Yeah. So I think it permeates from down, and that's why I think we created an environment last year with that show, with all the difficulties of changing schedules and people going down, is that people just said, okay, we're just moving on. Just do it,
And it really does help that, I've really been doing theater way too long. It's like, I hate to think how many decades I've been doing this. I am so proud of the shows that we do. I just feel like this is the kind of theater I've always wanted to do. I mean, I really love the shows. And we watch the band. We're in the band. We got to sit on the side of the stage. We have to watch every show.
Yeah.
So
Every
we see
single
it a
line,
lot.
every show.
Very loud, every show. We know them all. So you got to be good or we
Yeah.
get bored. And we never do. We always adore it. It's just, it's a privilege. I mean, it's a great playwright. You can't get a better writer behind you.
You got that.
But the shows are just gorgeous. They're just gorgeous, and it's so pleasing to see.
I wanted to briefly mention that, every single performance, at least our performance I've been involved with, I don't know if every performance of the curtain, has a live band, which is, a rarity even in musical theater today,
Right.
and a live band that is performing original music written by members of the band.
Yeah.
So, you guys are part of that band. I wonder how, could you two talk about,
Well, it's interesting. I'm trying to think of how this evolved because, as maybe some people don't realize, there's songs in a lot of Shakespeare's plays, but we basically don't know the melodies to any of the songs.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's often a thing people do is write melodies to Shakespeare's words. And, I can't remember where the very first ones get, but Michelle and I would usually, we play Celtic music. We would bring in things that we knew, basically it's sort of a Celtic band that, tries to put on a veneer of Italy or whatever, wherever we are. But it's at heart a Celtic band.
Italian, right?
And so I'm trying to remember the places I first got asked to write stuff. I know Susanna did ask me. Basically, it just kind of gradually grew this idea of composing, and what was a little more audacious is putting in lyrics. My lyrics into Shakespeare plays. So that was a little strange. So the first one, we actually used it in Michelle's production of Twelfth Night, but I wrote this song called Illyria that was in Michael's initial Twelfth Night back, which was our third or fourth production. And I just kind of sung it at the break and nobody really noticed. I didn't really kind of sort of push myself out into that. And then I remembered for the Much Ado, I wrote the song called There's a Mess in Messina. Which is kind of funny. But again, I didn't really make it part of the show. So it's kind of a little bit on the side, putting these things on and gradually getting more to the point where, yes, we do the Shakespeare songs, but I would, allow myself a song or two. Like actually also another thing that was one of the first one was in the initial production of, I should say we've done Twelfth Night 3 times actually. In the Susanna Woods production of Twelfth Night, I wrote the song called "The Thorns Among the Roses" that we sang again in mine. And there's it's just like Olivia. We just put Olivia singing a song in the middle of the show, which is kind of Shakespeare didn't do that. That's totally our idea. But Mary, the woman who acted the part in that production, had a really sweet voice, and Farron, who kind of got into that role kind of last minute, she wasn't so much a diehard singer, but she did a good job with it, and we had some harmonies on that.
And for a purely technical point of view, we're outside. We have no lights.
Yeah.
We have no way of getting audience back into their seats after intermission. But there's some things that you need the music to do that lighting wouldn't do otherwise, and that is that or sound, it's piped in, is to set mood, to cover the fact that we have a costume change.
Right.
Some songs have come in because we had a double casting and they gotta change a costume.
And also it helps set the if we're doing it, this will be like our second or third in a row Italian. So it has a little bit of Italian flavor. The music that helps kind of set that.
Yeah.
And Hal's stuff is that I was doing, they used to, in Berkeley, there was something called Subterranean Shakes, which was just a lot of actors would get together and we do these stage readings of plays. And when I was doing those, I ran across Hal, who was playing violin.
Hal
Hughes was just, you hardly ever meet musicians who especially the kind of writing trad sort of music, who understand theater, who actually would play behind actors, and he was just underscoring. He would just underscore monologues and things and all sorts of
Usually,
parts of the plays.
often improvised.
Right. Usually, if you're underscoring, improvisation is the easiest thing to do because you have to follow what the actor's doing. And he was really good at it.
Wow.
So I said, you belong with us.
But meanwhile, he's written like more than 1,000 tunes.
He's got books of tunes.
Just like in the Scottish kind of tradition. So when a new production comes up, I usually write stuff from scratch. Hal, it's more like we pull from his bag.
Right.
And sees where, and he's got things that are really good for underscoring under things,
crooked tins,
give you an idea how this works as well. If you take last year's show, Two Gentlemen of Verona, so you have the outlaw scene where they meet Valentine, right? And you read the play, and you could kind of make it comic, but it's not very much, right? So Don and I talked about, this has got to be a song. And so he writes a song, and I do this wild, funny dance, and all of a sudden it's a centerpiece of the show. Everybody loves it.
Yeah.
And I just came totally from working and having the ability of someone to create a song out of it.
Yeah.
Right? So it really made it different.
Then the song for Sylvia.
Yeah.
Wasn't that basically to cover a costume change or
To cover Jamin costume changing
Yeah,
from the doll back in Korea.
So,
Yeah.
But that was, it's like, we need this here. It's like, I'm a journalist. I'm used to deadline. I need this many words in a certain time period. Deliver it then. And so that's kind of I don't really usually compose much music besides this, but it helps to have like I needed to do this and to be here and cover this much time, and that helps me.
And again, that was a really lovely song.
Right. It was. Isabel Grimm in that show, and she's been in a lot of shows at the Curtain. She calls them Elizabethan bops.
Right.
Whenever there's a really good one, we got that Elizabethan bop that Jillian sings in Two Gentlemen of Verona. Farron sang Elizabethan bop the year before. I thought that was a funny term.
I'm gonna miss her this year.
Me too.
It's a separation thing.
It's a delicate balance trying to put music in under the play without it becoming a musical. I mean, people really do turn these plays into musicals successfully, a lot of them, and we're not doing musicals.
Yeah.
And we have a very acoustic band, and they're basically, it's fiddle, a concertina, and flute with guitars. And when you come in, as we've had some musical productions, or ones that we did a shrew that was full of kind of jazz, and the director was a very slick production, but he kept coming up and asking us to do basically big band music.
Yeah,
and it was like, big band music. Okay, guys.
And it's actually Comedy of Errors. That was
Comedy of Errors, too.
Yeah.
I was a jazz band singer. That's why I remember.
Where's our jazz?
And so he basically that was a kind of a rarity because he picked all the tunes and they're all 1920s jazz tunes that we did.
Yeah.
And thank God we found this guy named Ben Brown,
Oh,
who
Ben Brown.
is again, not only a music geek but a musical theater geek. And the guy can play any instrument in the world, but he's mainly a trumpet player. But basically, he totally made the band acceptable as kind of jazz.
Totally.
And for both that show and Hot Day in Ephesus, which is the musical, straight out musical based on Comedy of Errors, those were plays we needed piano. So that meant electricity, and that's like the slippery slope of wires and everything, and then if you amplify the piano, you got to amplify other instruments to kind of bring it up, and then are you drowning out the so it becomes I think I really relish the no electricity philosophy.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
So I want to end us off with one more question to all three of you. I want to go through one at a time. You've said many reasons why, but I want to know, you guys have been doing this for a while now. What keeps you coming back every single year to putting on these, just this huge undertaking, which is putting on live theater in a park, even though it's low budget at this caliber, So Steve, I'll start with you, and then we'll go down the line.
I mean, I think it starts, and you can say that probably for all of us, is I've loved Shakespeare since I was a little boy. First time I read it, I loved it. I was able to take a full year of Shakespeare in high school. That's all I did for literature that full year, and rural Canada, which is kind of amazing. So that's the main thing. I love Shakespeare being part of it and bringing out these plays in a way that the audience can understand and grasp everything that they're doing, but also be thoroughly entertained is extremely rewarding. So one is the Shakespeare side of it. Another one is, I always try to get actors at some point, you know this, when we're getting ready for production, I get them to go back and sit on the benches and just look at where you are. Look at where you are in this redwood grove. You're getting to perform the best plays ever written in this environment. And that's pretty magical. And then the third element is that the community, because I really, as someone who lives in Mill Valley, I feel this is super important for the community as a whole, for kids to get exposure to Shakespeare. And kids almost universally come and love it. You know, I think it's a really profound thing that we do in that. And being part of the community and adding, that's another thing for me that's just really important. So it'll be those things, really.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm the son of an English lit professor, and didn't go into that. Went to journalism instead. But I was always around, kind of that environment. But also, my father was a writer of musicals, and so he taught at Caltech, and he wrote funny musicals about science, songs about science and things like that, about the Richter scale and about Fortran and genetics and all kinds of stuff. So although that I wouldn't say that environment was exactly literary, it was it was kind of informed by these things. Like his musicals would often invoke quote Shakespeare or something like that. He did musicals actually in my elementary school PTA, I remember. In fact, you'll know this, but it was the framing device for this thing was these two people who were writing a musical about this thing, and there it was. Clark and Davis, shows written while you wait.
You took that to heart.
But anyway, so I guess just being if it were not for Michelle, who has always been an actor, I would never have gotten into any of this. And so I'm a music. I've always played music. So this was kind of this was not a path it kind of came to us me rather late in life. But it's very important for our marriage, really, to have something to do. And I think this is one of the reasons marriages break up, is because they don't have a common interest, that something to do together. To have something, after you stop raising the kids, what's your chore? What are you doing? What's your project? And frankly, for us, that's a lot of this is just, this is our family project.
It's true, and I agree with everything Steve said. He really hit those, but I got the bug very young, and I threw myself at it. And Ashlyn, I can blame that on Ashlyn, but I was doing Shakespeare festivals when I was about 18. From then on, I just kept going, and it's so it's something that's very dear to me. And the reason that I love to do this, the curtain, is that really it's the moment when if you're sitting in the band, you're watching the audience through the play, the moment when you look up and you see a rapt audience, and you're sharing the best with them.
Yeah.
And they were really rapt last year.
They were really rapt last year, yeah.
Yeah,
And for two gentlemen who wrote it, that is an ugly little play. I remember taking on that play. I thought Steve was out of his mind when he said he wanted to do it. But I was proved wrong in a big way. I was just delighted to be. But it is just this sort of feeling that, wow, this is just, it's a high, this little moment when everyone comes together, like the audience and the play and the design and the actors, and they all hit this one point, and it's just like magic. And to be able to take something I love so much and share it in that way is, it's a privilege I can't imagine anywhere else. It's just wonderful.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast. Tune in next time, and when me and Steve Beecroft sit down to talk about this summer's production of Romeo and Juliet. All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thus ends this episode of Behind the Curtain, a production of the Curtain Theatre. The Curtain Theatre of Mill Valley, California provides free outdoor theatre during the summer in Old Mill Park, focusing on Shakespeare and other classics. We do so out of love for great drama, and in the belief that the gathering of audience and artists around great plays in this intimate and beautiful setting adds immeasurably to the quality of life in the community. We exist gratefully through the city sponsorship of the Mill Valley Arts Commission and Parks and Recreation Department, along with generous community donations. Information is available at curtaintheatre.org. If we do meet again, why, we shall smile. If not, why then, this parting was well made.